Tonight at 9 p.m. on ESPN, Summer League action underway from Salt Lake City, the Sixers and the Jazz. NBA front office insider Bobby Marks is with us once again. He's been a regular here lately. Bobby, who are three players that we should keep an eye on in Salt Lake City Summer League? Starting with a guy that Danny Ainge was determined to draft, who did show up after all.
Bailey, the Rutgers for the fifth pick in the draft, and certainly we're going to have our eyes on Ace in Utah here. I think the interesting thing for me with Ace is, does Utah play him more a point guard here? Here's a player that averaged 2 turnovers last year at Rutgers, only 1.3 assists, and as you know, Hannah, Summer League is about experimenting. BJ Edgecombe is the next player, the third overall pick in the draft. The 76ers guard is probably the most athletic player in this year's draft, 2.1 assists last year at Baylor. Another player who is going to probably experiment a little bit upside tendency is probably to rely more about getting to the basket. We'll see as far as how his mid-range game is in Utah. And then the third player here, America is going to get introduced to Nikola Topic, the 12th pick in the 2024 draft, courtesy of, guess what, the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? We haven't seen Topic in a year. He's been recovering from an ACL injury. I talked to one scout. They said if he was in this year's draft, he could potentially have been a top 5 pick.
Wow. And this is a guy that turns 20 in August. Just another addition to that young roster. Very interesting. All right, let's pivot, if we can, to the available veteran free agents. You've been on that all week long. What's the latest on where Chris Paul and Al Horford might land? And if you could start with CP3.
Yeah, it's funny. We just talked about the youth in the draft. Now we're talking to more about the seasoned veterans here in free agency. Certainly Chris Paul, the 40-year-old, 82 games last year, 82 starts. I would keep an eye on 2 teams here, Hannah. The Milwaukee Bucks, certainly with the loss of Damian Lillard, and his former team, the Phoenix Suns. 2 fits as far as where Chris Paul could eventually wind up. Al Horford is a little bit more interesting here. A team like Golden State, who lacks front court depth with Horford here, 39, has averaged at least 6 rebounds in every season here. A lot of what happens with Horford in Golden State is dependent on Jonathan Kuminga, the restricted free agent who still is unsigned. But hopefully by the end of next week, both those players will have a new home.
I love the idea of Horford with the Warriors. Yeah, that's really interesting way to round out that roster. Finally, you know, we're doing 50 states in 50 days, and we're in Missouri today. So what about the future of a St. Louis native? Let's talk about Bradley Beal, signed for 2 more years there in Phoenix. 2nd year as a player option, also has a no-trade clause. So what's the latest on his future with that?
Yeah, Bradley Beal owed $111 million over the next 2 years. Of course, Phoenix tried to move him at the deadline. That no-trade clause did become a hindrance here. Hannah, I think we're looking at a breakup between both Beal and the Phoenix Suns. And similar to what we saw with Damian Lillard, people are going to get used to that waiver and stretch provision here. If you look at it for Beal, a potential $20 million cap hit in Phoenix. Remember, this is a team that's been buried in the luxury tax, have been buried in the second apron. By reducing that Beal number, they get out of both of those numbers, which could save them potentially $200 million.
Wow, and talk about a return on investment. If you look back at the last 6 seasons for Bradley Beal, he's never played more than 60 games. Bobby Marks, we appreciate you, as always.
That has been in the ether for a few days now. Maybe by the time this pod comes out, it'll have been done. Maybe it won't be done, but we all know that this is true, that they are in serious discussions. And so on the heels of Dame Lillard getting bought out, getting basically waived and stretched on $113 million, Bradley Beal is probably going to get bought. It probably is not going to be that high because I think Beal is intending, or at least discussing.
Well, here's the thing. It can't be that high. So there's a quirk in the rules. We talked about this with the Dame Lillard wave and stretch, where a team cannot have more than 15% of the salary cap in dead money at any time. So in the past few years, the Suns have at different points waived and stretched E.J. Liddell, former Ohio State star, and Nasir Little. And those 2 guys this year are going to be on the books, according to Bobby Marks, for about $3.8 million. So a maximum amount that you can have on your books is somewhere around $23 million this year in dead money. So because of that, Bradley Beal, who's currently owed about $110 million, I think it's just a little bit less than what Dame's deal was. He's got to give back at least 13 or 14 million or so to allow it to be a legal buyout. So the Suns are going to end up with basically the same dead cap hit that the Bucks are going to have on their books, but because of this Nasir Little signing that this wave and stretch in the past, they have to get Brad to give back a little bit just so they can actually do it.
And look, typically a buyout is a guy gives back the money he's getting on his next deal. You know, it's I don't know. Is there a situation now where Beal can get $14 million? Is there a team? Is there a team that has the full non-taxpayer mid-level? I don't see one.
There's a few teams that
would make sense for him.
I mean, I don't know
my
how
point
far
is,
in a realm going.
Yeah, I'm not looking for aggregation.
Go to the realm of speculation.
Okay, my point is
there's a couple places he could go.
Well,
my point is this is
real quick. He doesn't
buyout.
have to get. He doesn't have to get. If he's, let's just say for the sake of the discussion, he's leaving $14 million on the table, and he wants to be whole. Because, for example, DeAndre Ayton didn't quite get whole. He was a couple of million short of being whole, but he went from being a possible third stringer in Portland to starter in LA. Yeah. If Beal's looking to be whole, he just needs to make $14 million over 2 years. He doesn't have to make it all back this year. So but he's going to get bought out, very likely. They're haggling about money. You know, I mean, I remember when I went, was around the Suns for a little bit to write the story on the not so pleasant state of the Suns, and you know, this was when Beal had heard his name in trade rumors for months, despite the fact he had a no trade clause. And I talked to him about it. And he was honest about it. And by the way, he'd also been, in his eyes, demoted to a 6-man role for a while there. You know, he said he felt disrespected, but you know, he mentioned like, hey, there wasn't anything that made sense before the trade deadline. He didn't want to, just like KD, he didn't want to uproot his family or you know, his personal life. In Beal's case, his family, young kids, wife, in the middle of the season. But he pointed out, like, you know, summer, there's a lot more options on the table. There's a lot more possibilities. I don't think Bradley Beal is in any way, shape, or form opposed to getting his walking papers from Phoenix. I think he just wants as much of the money as possible to go along with him. Yeah. So there might be some more by the time we do our next podcast. There might be some more there, but I will just say, like, if they do this buyout, it will save the Suns somewhere in the neighborhood. You know, they haven't completed their roster yet. They could add more to it, but I believe, Bontemps, it will.
Bill, I live here still and train every summer. Y'all bored, man? Go get a plate of food somewhere and enjoy the 4th of July. You know.